Well, good morning to anybody who may still be here, although I think I'm probably not talking to anybody now. It's okay. What does it matter? I think maybe my channel got choked off because I spoke of things that are banned and then I got a strike. Maybe that's what happens. Now look at that lighter. That's my good one. And if I get my armoured lighter, which I have with me, yes, it's here, how will that behave? Oh, yes. In the hot weather, the lighter fuel evaporates faster. I think that's what happens. I'm thinking about being in a bad mood today. I'm planning it a little bit. Or rather, I'm being hassled at work and a lot of pressure is being brought to bear, and I find it irksome. I mean, really. I was looking at the Textus Receptus Bibles website earlier. I don't know whether anybody knows it. Maybe everybody does. It's a great resource. If you just put in Textus Receptus Bibles, it'll take you there. And I was looking at the Wessex Gospels, which is the earliest English translation of just the Gospels. And it's written in Old English or Middle English or some English that's rather difficult to understand. And apparently there's 7 copies of these books in existence. Two of them are in Oxford, but of those two, one was copied by Oxford scholars not that long ago, I think. Well, in the 1700s, perhaps. Because the Wessex Gospels are 1175. That was the first time we had any English. It's not a Bible, you see, so it doesn't count in the 7 Bibles, but nonetheless very interesting to look at. And to think that, you know, back in 1175 we did have access to something of the Bible in English for the first time. Otherwise it was Latin, and we had to rely, I suppose, a little bit on the scholars and the priests. Or I don't know how much Latin was known, probably not much. I don't know, maybe just scholars and priests and scribes, idiots like me. I'm a scribe. I'm not a scholar, and I'm not a priest. I'm a scribe sore pressed at the moment, and so it is. And I wrote to the publishers of the Textus Receptus Bibles. I tried to, and it turned out they're published by, or they're, if you follow the links, you get to a website called Masonsoft, which is kind of interesting. Masonsoft something or other. You'll get taken there, and there was an opportunity there to interact, so I wrote a courteous letter to inform them that in the description in the Textus, in the Wessex Gospel, in the Webster's Bible rather, I think it's the Webster's. No, it's the Wycliffe. No, Webster's is nothing. It's the Wycliffe Bible. I'm getting the name wrong. And they'd used the word where, but it was written W-H-E-R-E when they really meant to use the verb. It happens. I do that sometimes because I'm thinking aloud, as it were. I'm following my thoughts and not my spelling. I didn't even know that where and where were different when I first went to Italy. And I was already, well, I knew they were sort of different, but I didn't fully understand the problem. And I would have been, I don't know how old I was at that time. Was I 23? Ignorant as the driven snow, you know. And I had to learn more about that, because then I started teaching English, which I didn't really understand. I knew I could speak it more or less, but apart from that. But what they wanted was somebody who could speak it, and suddenly I became valuable. And that's how it was in Italy in those years. In the early years, we were few English speakers dispersed around the country, and we were in high demand because we were native speakers, and the Italians could copy the way that we spoke. We were like walking videotapes. I don't know, and various methods were devised for teaching people English quickly, which was important because English was seen as being a language that would allow a man or a woman to raise their social status, I guess, and increase their salary. I don't know how many people did it out of pure love of the language. I don't know, but you know, England's always had quite a strong influence in the world. I mean, that's why we all speak English. It just is. I'm sorry if you're French and you think we should all speak French. We don't. We all ended up speaking English. There's something about it. Well, the Bible's in English, you see. This is the fact. Because when you follow the old Bibles, you know, you'll find that the number of Bibles leading to the authorized version is 6, and then the authorized version is the 7th. That's just how it is. And you don't count the Wessex Gospels, of course, because they're just the Gospels. The count starts from Wycliffe in, that was mid-1300s. I forget the exact date. Was it 1370 or something or other? Wycliffe translated from the Masoretic text, I think, or from a Latin Bible. And he's writing in Old English. Then you get the Coverdale in about 1530, and the Matthews a couple of years later, I think, these men produced Old and New Testament Bibles using Tyndale's text, but Tyndale never produced an actual Bible. He only produced the New Testament, so he can't be included in the count. But Coverdale and Matthews must be, of course, so that's 1, 2, 3. And then you've got the Great Bible. Then you've got, I apologize, you've got the Geneva Bible. Then you have the Great Bible, and then finally you have the Bishop's Bible, upon which the King James Bible was based by edict. I'm speaking about an edict rather than a translation matter, because the learned men, I mean, they consulted the Wessex Gospels in their work. They were very diligent indeed. Very much so. But, you know, the die had been cast, as it were. This was the Bible, and this was their basis by royal command, at a time when royal meant somebody appointed, a king appointed by the Lord. King James I of England, and I think King James VI of Scotland. The same man. The King of Scotland, when the King of Scotland returns to the throne, then the world will be at peace. That's what I've come to believe. I don't know. So I've been put on the naughty step, perhaps, on the internet. I'm not sure about it, but I might have been. I mean, it could just be that what I talk about is so dull and tedious that nobody cares about it. That's fine. I guess I find it interesting, and I form theories, but they're not cast in stone. I'm often wrong. I know that because I'm a translator, and I'm never short of people to inform me about it when I am. I have to mind my P's and Q's, but I can't really be entirely bothered with a recent job when I see such chaos surrounding it and so many software barriers. Everything has become so complex, you see, and the secret, if you like, or the something that we believers with a spiritual understanding perhaps only can truly understand, is that the digital architecture, the digital infrastructure is collapsing even as I speak, because it's just become so insanely iterated and referential and complex, and it can't seem to stop evolving, so we can no longer really interact with it. It's taken on a life of its own. No sooner have you learned one interaction than it's changed and updated and modernized. They're aiming for the golden dawn, but they're not going to reach it. It's just eternal. There's no end to this, because there's no point of perfection in man. Perfection is only in the living God. So it's doomed. It's already failing, and it's going to fail more and more disastrously. You only need a few digits going off and then getting sucked into the system, and it's already happened. That's why it's become so infernally difficult to interact with computers. Even if you paid and got all your credentials in order, something will crop up to make your life difficult. And they'll say, well, once you've got the software inside of you, it'll be fine. Well, I don't know. I read the reviews. It doesn't sound great. And life has become so brutal and punishing, I think, over the many centuries, because we don't follow the Lord. Why can't we have clay pots and stone jars full of clean water? Why do we have to have plastic bottles full of questionable contents? Why can't we have a well, a deep well of pure water, full of life, and drink deeply from it, as we did in the olden days? Why must we fall on our knees to some soft drinks company or bottled water company or filter company just to have a drink that won't kill us? water full of life. They started analysing water, of course, and then they said, well, we can't be having this well because it's got this sort of life in it, this sort of bacteria. And we can't be using that one because we've measured it and we found this and we found that. And people had been drinking from those wells for centuries. And they capped them. And they said, no, you'd better drink this clean water that we're going to supply, in which we're going to put all sorts of different chemicals that will be harmful. This is the world that we're living in. It's absolutely ridiculous. Why can't we have a local potter making pots at a decent price and keep our liquids and our wine? Stone containers, they would be very precious. I had a stone pot in Italy. It's still intact, actually. It's in my wife's house. It was very expensive. It's a stone sculpture, if you like, carved on a lathe. These are beautiful things, and we can make them within the community. We don't need to send off to Amazon. You know, we can have local farmers and local millers and local craft workers. We need to push back all this technology that has been pressed upon us. I know it means you have to do without MX5s, but they're just conceit, really. Ultimately, I think that's how it works. I don't know whether you can have all that stuff and still have MX5s, because then you need the whole oil industry and electricity and all these things, which have proven to be a little bit problematic. I don't know what utopia they call it in the atheist community. I think you call it a utopia, and it's known for not existing. Whereas, you know, we see it as being heaven on earth, and we're told that it can't exist. Well, why not? I mean, really, why can't men have a quiver full of children looking after them, men of age? Why can't they walk in the streets and be respected? Why can't women be trim and beautiful? Why must they be so immense and perverted in their ways? Why can't men develop understanding instead of watching football? The mind is the first thing that they've taken. This is the problem. But the Lord is working through England, through Britain. There's no question of it. And times are going to get probably kind of interesting. Well, they already are so interesting to me that I really can hardly think of anything else. And I'm astonished that so many people seem to be almost perversely averting their gaze, as our governments have done. There's been no official explanation for the lockdowns and the COVID and all the rest of it, although a great many questions have been asked. But all we hear is silence. There are some very serious questions to be answered, and none of them has been. Well, there are some very serious questions about the moon landing hoax and all the rest of it. Whatever you look at, no answer is the reply. Well, I better shut up then, and I'll bless anybody who may have heard this. It's a bit of a long rant. I'm in a slightly long ranty mood. What people don't know about me, and I don't know whether it seems to me to be important in a way. When I was a lad, very young, I became obsessed with Scotland. I wanted to be Scottish. I admired Scotland so much. And I think it was just because there was a show on television. I think it was the Jimmy Stewart show or something like that. And it was like Scottish dancing and Scottish singing. And I really enjoyed it as a young lad, as a child, to the point that I wanted to have a kilt, and so my parents bought me a kilt, and they also bought me some bagpipes, but they weren't real bagpipes. They were just toy bagpipes. They worked with reeds rather than with air, but they looked a bit like bagpipes. And I was able to have those socks, and I tucked a knife in my socks. That was very important. I was very keen on having a knife. And somebody got me a sporran where you put your money. And then I had like a sash and probably a hat. I don't know what I wore. I mean, I was a pretty precocious, I don't know, weird child, I guess. I was influenced by the television, not by my peers. And I think the thing that struck me about Scotland, there was a heroism and a patriotism, a talk of adventures and boldness that, as a young boy, it just inspired me. I heard it of Scotland, that Scotland was a land to be proud of and to die for. And I've been to Scotland a couple of times. I don't know whether it's a physical thing. I think it's more of a spiritual thing with me. I no longer wish I was Scottish. I'm quite happy to be English, and, I'm happy with who I am. I think maybe when I was younger, I felt more Scottish. I've got red in my beard, actually. Maybe there is some Scottish blood in me. I'm sure there is Scottish blood in many English families. But Scotland is the key, you see. We have to remember that Hadrian's Wall never fell. The Romans didn't overwhelm the Scots. They resisted. And that's a spiritual sign. It's the sides of the north. That's why it's so important. So, I salute any Scottish people who are hearing this, if anybody does hear it and they happen to be Scottish. But, we all have, our blood is mixed among our people to some measure. Of course it is. But that was my childhood as an absolute Scottish fanatic. And I went to the church hall and I sang a Scottish soldier accompanied by the piano solo on the stage, probably dressed in my kilt. And I later sang another Scottish song. What's that romantic one that I did sing? I can't remember the title of that one, but I sang a couple, whether on the same occasion or on 2 consecutive years, I just can't remember. So that's just a weird thing about me. And now that I'm coming to understand scripture, and I think anyway, and some prophecy, it just seems to be even more kind of like a sign in a way. that had been placed upon me. We need patriotism. Perhaps at the time it had been somewhat lost in England, you see, because there was all the shame that was spreading about the wars. This is what they'd done. We were persuaded, I suppose, to forget the war and to move on. We were being very carefully manipulated by the television set. This is the problem. You know, in the olden days, the only thing that you had to manipulate you was the Holy Bible. That was the information that was held among us, and knowledge of it. And that's what we need to get back to. It really is to get back to the Word of God as our standard, and to switch off the wretched news programs and television articles and all the rest of it. They're just distraction. This is a spiritual battle that we're fighting. And Scotland the Brave has its part to play. God bless this day.